welcome to the Glendale City Council meeting of March the 5th, 2013. May we have a roll call, please?
Council members: Friedman.
Here.
Manukian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Mayor Quintero.
Here. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Councilmember Manukian.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. Ready? Begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Please remain standing for the invocation, which will be delivered by Reverend Charles Updike of the First Baptist Church of Glendale.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we honor you when we gather together and extend hands to one another to work together. We ask, Lord, that you would bless our council and our city as we endeavor to improve the quality of life for all our citizens. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Mr. Clerk, may we have your report?
The agenda for the March 5th, 2013 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, February 28th, 2013 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
What's next?
Next, under presentation and appointments, at 3A is the agenda preview for the meetings of March 12th, 2013.
Spears.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, for the Glendale Housing Authority, we have one business agenda item, and that's Director of Community Development regarding amendment to the Multifamily Affordable Housing Rehab Loan Agreement with S.H. Hope and Compassion Center, a California nonprofit public benefit corporation. And that's in the afternoon to commence at 3 p.m. That afternoon, we also have a special meeting of the Glendale City Council, and this is a public hearing, Director of Community Development. This is regarding revisions to approved sign program for the Americana brand, Nordstrom, and request for various variances. For the City Council meeting to commence at 6 p.m., we have a number of consent items. Director of Public Works, this is regarding the I-5 SR 134 congestion management project, and this is in connection with spec number 3503. General Manager of GWP, this is regarding custodial services at various GWP facilities. Director of Community Services and Parks, this is a status of the Essentia Homeless Access Center and Emergency Shelter Rehab Project. Under action items, we have two items. City Attorney, this is proposed ordinance related to the prohibition of shows and sales of guns and ammunition on city property. And lastly, Director of Community Development, this is regarding a presentation of initial concept alternatives for the Space 134 project. And that concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next, please.
Next, at 3B is Mayor's commendation to Glendale Adventist Medical Center, the Americana brand, and Pacific BMW for their 2013 Rose Float sponsorship.
All right, I'd like to have the representatives of the Americana brand, Glendale Adventist Medical Center, and Pacific BMW come to the podium, please. The mayor's commendation reads as follows to those three businesses that I just mentioned. On behalf of the City of Glendale and the City Council, I would like to express my sincere appreciation for your sponsorship of the 2013 Glendale Rose Float. Your commitment and support contributed to keeping history and tradition alive and thriving. Congratulations on being a major part of this year's award for Governor's Trophy for the best depiction of life in California. Frank Quintero, Mayor of the City of Glendale, and I'll get some of the council members to
support. I have, okay, so I can't. Congratulations and thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for helping.
How are you? Thank you.
Please say a few words.
Oh, I just want to express my appreciation to be able to have a business in City of Glendale for over 30 years. What a great city it is to have us here doing business, great people, great council. I love it here. And really privileged to be able to participate in the Rose Float. And I hope this go on forever and ever, and then we win many more awards. Thank you.
That was Nick Lamb from Pacific BMW. Give us your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Kevin Roberts, president of Glendale Adventist Medical Center. It was an honor to participate in this, and not only was it an honor, it was a lot of fun. Our team really got into it. I got to go in and actually get all gummed up with glue and seeds and flowers and things, and then of course to see realizing that the city of Glendale was struggling that year. It was great to be a partner with these other business leaders to make a difference for Glendale and to maintain that long-standing tradition of the float and the parade. So it was our pleasure, and thanks for letting us help it out.
And I'm Rick Limo with Caruso Affiliated in the Americana brand. And on behalf of our founder, Rick Caruso, and our entire team, it was an honor and a privilege for us to participate as well. Also want to pass along a thank you for the patience and the skill of the Phoenix Float Company, who helped put their arms around these cats that they had to herd with all these tremendous different ideas, and they turned it into the Governor's Award, and we're very proud to be part of it. Thank you.
I had a tour from Mr. Dave Weaver, retired Dave Weaver at the time, in a very cold, warehouse where this is built. But it's just astounding what it takes to put one of these things together. Okay, what's next, Mr.
Next
Clerk?
is city council and staff comments.
Ms. Friedman.
I am reluctantly bringing up something that is difficult for me to bring up and very disturbing, but something that I feel that as a council we have to address. It's come to my attention and to many of my colleagues' attention that one of our city commissioners may have been behaving inappropriately on the internet for the past 5 or 6 years. I wouldn't bring this up if it was not a very long series of posts around the internet, on blog sites and on YouTube, that are extremely disturbing, that are racist, homophobic, misogynist, threatening, and really beyond something that we as a city can afford to have associated with one of our commissioners. The evidence that I've seen is very compelling, but I do believe we need to give this commissioner, who is R.A. Asanian, a chance to respond. I would like to ask my colleagues to agendize this topic to be brought up for the removal of this commissioner at next week's meeting.
I think I learned about these possible actions earlier. I think it is only fair that we do agendize this to give Mr. Sinanian a chance to address them, to discuss any response that he has with the council before we take any full action regarding his membership on the CDBG.
I don't know. I haven't seen anything. I don't know anything about it. But let me remind everyone that it's campaign season, and this particular gentleman is running for a city council seat. So are two of my colleagues here. So it's very odd, especially during the election, things like this come up. I would prefer leaving it after the election to determine what this is all about. And again, I haven't seen or heard anything about it. This is the first I hear of it. And again, election season's here, I guess. It's been here for a while, but here we go. So.
Well, I haven't heard anything about it, but I have received the information via email, and it is disturbing. So I think we need to...
Everybody got the email except me? Is that it?
I guess so. I got it from someone that I didn't know or don't know the person.
I haven't looked at it yet.
Okay. Well,
That's nice. I didn't get the email, just so everybody knows.
I'll make a copy for you.
That's okay. If we agendize it, I think it should be made public.
All right. Any other?
I have comments.
Manukian?
I know you enjoy my
Yes, I do.
my rants about my adventures over the weekend, and I was I was out biking again over the weekend, and one issue that struck me is that one road biker who got hit on Zoo Drive, and if there are individuals in the community who have information about the car that hit it, or any other information, there's a $25,000 reward on it. It's just unthinkable that this individual struck a rider on their bike and sped up and kept going and did even more damage than they would have done just by striking the individual. So they dragged the individual for I don't know how many yards. So it's just a call for everyone to be careful on the streets, and if there's anyone with any information about this incident, and it's down the street from Glendale on Zoo Drive by Griffith Park, if you have any information, contact the Glendale Police Department, or the numbers are in the news press. Contact them, and you will be helping a great deal when it comes to issues such as these, like hit and run, especially a pedestrian or an individual on a bicycle. I mainly prefer riding in the mountains because of situations like this. And I was out riding in Sycamore, and that was great fun. I rode about 13 miles. However, once in a while I run across articles in the newspaper, in some newspapers, and I think this is certainly noteworthy to mention here. It's about cycling again. I know everyone has a stern face, and I'm trying to maybe lighten it up a little bit. And this comes from Seattle, Washington, a state lawmaker from Seattle, Washington, who says that bicycling is not good for the environment. He does not think that bicycling is environmentally friendly because the activity causes to have an increased heart rate and respiration of the individual riding the bike. And his email to his constituent is that you would be giving off more CO2 if you are riding a bike than driving in a car. So,
Are you sure that's a real article?
that's a real article. I even have a copy of his email. He said, however, he has not done any checking or any analysis of the difference in CO2 from a person on a bike compared to the engine of a car. So I think, and he adds that you just can't say that there's no pollution as a result of riding a bicycle. So I think we have to kind of be in front of this issue and tax the pollution from the bikes somehow, and see how we can address it at the local level. Of course, they're addressing it in Washington State, I guess, at the state level. But I think this is a politician. I just wanted to make fun of us a little bit.
Well, I just wanted to say, in that case, they might check the pollution in front of this dais.
I'm glad that Mr. Mnookin brought this up, because there was also a letter to the editor in the news press about that accident and about that particular intersection,
Right.
Going in and out of Griffith Park. And even though it's City of Los Angeles and we have absolutely no control over it, I'd like to ask our staff to reach out to them, because it's really one of the only ways into Griffith Park from Glendale by bicycle. So we have a lot of Glendale residents using that particular stretch of road where you're going over the bridge that has highway entrances and exits on both sides, and it's very treacherous to navigate, and a lot of cyclists use it. So maybe we can reach out to the City of Los Angeles, whatever council member that is. I think it's probably Tom LaBonge, but I'm not sure, to see if we can work with them, or they will take seriously the task of really doing whatever they need to do in terms of signage and road striping and whatever they can do to make that a safer intersection. It's really, I've ridden over it a few times, and it's very crowded with cars and with bicycles, and really a problem. Thanks.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to talk about some of the events that most of the council members attended, starting with the Armenian International Medical Fund, which is actually the executive director is Mr. Najarian's cousin, Salpi, who is an RN at UCLA, and a wonderful doctor named Dr. Akira Ishiyama. He is a ear specialist, and he does implants. How do you say it? Cochlear, yeah, the cochlear implants. And so this gentleman, he literally leaves the LA area, flies hours and hours to Yerevan, Armenia, and generally gets there on a Saturday. He does 6 implants. He does 2 or 3 implants on Sunday and then flies all the way back. Obviously, he's a professor and head of the of that particular section at UCLA. But what an inspiring event this was, and what an inspiring individual. He is beyond belief. And of course, Alpi is the one that puts it together. But and she also is an RN, and so she obviously is there in the operating room. Then the Glendale Latino Association had its annual meeting where the Man of the Year was Chief DePampa. Woman of the Year was Robin Goldsworthy from the Crescenta Valley. Very well attended. The GLA contributed over $17,000 in scholarships last year to seniors here in the city of Glendale. But the best story was Chief DePampa's mom, who at the event, they asked her to stand up, and she decided to say a few words. She said she had I guess the chief has a few brothers and so forth, but that this son, from day one, never gave her any problems. The other ones did, but this was the perfect child who grew up to be the chief of police of Glendale. Very impressive. He started at a young age. And then finally, Chabad, Glendale had their 13th anniversary, also very well attended. They do wonderful work here in the city, and the rabbi was here a few weeks ago to accept a proclamation. So that's it. Is there anything from the staff? All right, we'll move on. Next, please.
Next on the agenda is consent items, including minutes. The following are routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such request before a motion is proposed.
Okay, I have a card to pull 5H.
Oh, I was going to talk about 5H.
All right, do I have a
Move the remainder of the consent calendar.
Second?
roll call?
Council members Friedman,
Yes.
Fanukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. Would you read 5H into the record, please?
Certainly. 5H is General Manager of Glendale Water and Power regarding transmittal of hexavalent chromium removal research project report to the California Department of Health. H1 is a motion to note and file the report.
You had a question, Mr.
Well, I want to give a report to the community, actually. I think this is an important issue. If we can talk about it.
Absolutely. Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Manukian.
And I always do this to you guys.
No, I think this is
right.
kind of what you've been waiting for.
Right, exactly.
So after over 10 years of hard work and research that the city's done and many other parties who have done yeoman's work on this, we have finalized the research report and have submitted that to the California Department of Public Health. Where that goes from here is that they will review it, and they will eventually, sometime in July, give us a standard that we've been missing. But I have with us today Ramona Boeg, our Chief Assistant General Manager for Water and Electric, and Dr. Nicole Blute from Hayes & Sawyer, who has done tremendous work on this. We have a very short presentation, then we can answer some questions for you if that's what you'd like.
Yes.
Very good. Mr. Boeg.
Good evening, Mayor Quintero, council members, Ramona Boeg, Assistant General Manager for Glendale Water and Power. Here with us tonight is just a quick summary of the report that we submitted to you and which we also distributed to California Department of Public Health for their consideration for setting the MCL. With me tonight to do that more technical part of the presentation is Dr. Nicole Blute. And she has a PhD in environmental engineering, and she's also a registered professional engineer in chemistry who has been with the project since almost the inception. But let me just point out what the objectives of this project was and what this report is intended to do. It's intended to demonstrate to the country and to the rest of the water industry that Glendale had taken the lead in trying to treat chromium-6 here in Glendale. And the result of the research is to be used by the Department of Public Health and as well as EPA in setting what we call the maximum contamination level that will be allowed in the drinking water. This project really is about finding the technology and the cost associated in the treatment of chromium-6. And this is a collaboration of several entities that participated not only in the funding of the project, but also in the management of the project from both a technical perspective and as well as to what's practical in the industry. What's important that I want to point out is we did have a project, or we still do, a project advisory committee that is made up of experts in the water industry that help us with this project, that gave us some guidelines. And with that, let me turn it over to Nicole and talk about the rest of the research.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to come and talk today about this research that we've been working on. I've been involved since 2002 in this work, and it's my honor to present it today and to have been involved all this time. I'll first start by talking about the problem itself. It's not only a Glendale issue. Hexavalent chromium is widespread throughout California and the country. This just shows an example of chromium occurrence throughout the United States. The EPA is currently conducting the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule at the moment for Chrome-6 and total chrome to get a better understanding of occurrence. So the EPA is on a similar track as the California Department of Public Health to set a regulatory standard. They're a couple years behind the state of California, so California will set a regulatory standard in July of 2013 this summer. The research really focused on...
Sorry, could you go
Certainly.
back one? Just wanted to take another look at the
None in Florida, Frank.
map.
Very few.
I'm surprised. So there's some states in gray that have absolutely no chromium, or
A lot of that has to do with there not being good occurrence data because it hasn't.
the port of Louisiana down in the New Orleans area, boy, that was striking. Biloxi, Mississippi is another one.
Yeah.
Okay.
There have been a couple of limited studies to date on chromium occurrence. Chromium is regulated as total chromium right now, chromium-6 plus chromium-3. So there is a database nationwide of that. But looking at low levels, below that 100 ppb federal standard, there is not a lot of information right now. And so that's part of this new regulation. Another thing I should mention about that, too, is that chromium is naturally occurring in some locations as well as anthropogenic in other locations, and that's something that has been noted in these studies. So the research really started in 2002 as a pretty broad analysis of technologies, a screening type of analysis. And what came out of that work, and then it got narrowed down to 7 technologies that were tested at pilot scale, small scale up to 2 gallons a minute, to get a sense of how feasible the technology was before you built a facility that was a large scale facility and cost quite a bit of money. So the 2 technologies that came out of this testing are weak base anion exchange resin and reduction coagulation filtration. So this shows an example of the different processes that go into, say, the weak base anion exchange. There's a few different things, including pH adjustment, so that the resin itself pulls out the chromium from the water. And then you have to do some treatment on the back end in order to make sure the water is stable and doesn't corrode the pipe materials when you put it into the pipes. Just to show a couple of pictures of the demonstration scale testing that's been done for over 2 years now. This is a 425-gallon-a-minute system in the city. It's located in the city of LA. It's a Glendale well GS3. It does have these vessels here shown in the figure in the back. They contain this ion exchange resin that does have this affinity for chromium, pulls the chromium out of the water. It does operate for more than a year before the resin has to be replaced. Compared to strong base anion exchange resin, which is a more traditional application, which goes for several days before it has to be regenerated with a salt brine. That was not selected for testing for a number of reasons in Glendale. This does continue to operate and does serve water to the Glendale community. The reduction coagulation filtration process, or otherwise known as RCF, this was a facility that was built for the testing purpose and took 100 gallons a minute off of one of the wells in the north part of the city. It also was sent to the Glendale Water Treatment Plant, where it was further processed for volatile organic compound removal. The operations were found to be much more labor-intensive, so that was an important component of the study, was to identify what was necessary to operate these facilities and how technologically feasible they were, how low they could get, and also the costs associated with those. So this facility is currently finished with its testing, and it's shut down at the moment. One of the important components of this testing was to develop cost information, both technical feasibility and cost information that could be provided to the state of California when they set their MCL. So they had that good baseline information to couple with the health information that was already established with the public health goal. So the range of estimated costs, this figure shows it does depend on the gallons per minute of the treatment facility. So if you think about Glendale's wells, they're typically in the range of 500 to 1,000 gallons a minute. And you can see these costs are in dollars per acre foot. And to give you a comparison, the dollars per acre foot for current metropolitan water that you buy is $847 an acre foot. So it shows that the treatment is in the same range for the typical 500 to 2,000 GPM facilities for both the WBA and for the RCF, and different iterations there. This range does show for getting treatment down to 5 parts per billion. So getting to below 1 part per billion would cost significantly more. This also does not take into account the fact that the city, should they decide to put in treatment, would need to come up with the capital in order to build the facilities. These are dollars per acre foot costs spread over a 20-year life cycle. And so just to conclude, the Glendale is the nationwide leader and is really looked at as such for doing this work on removing chromium-6 from the drinking water. There's been a lot of research that's coming out of this work and is now being tried at different utilities, but this really has kind of set the bar for the industry. Approximately $9 million has been spent to date, most of it coming from funds that were external to the city, including Glendale's management costs, have been funded by these other parties that were involved, as Ramon talked about. And the final project report was submitted on February 28th to California Department of Public Health, including the technical feasibility information of how low can you actually get with these treatment technologies, and also providing cost information for chrom-6 removal. And these will feed into the state's role of developing an MCL. So some minor work does remain. We're tying up a few loose ends. We have one project that will be done by the end of this year, and it's to basically look at additional resins that have come to the marketplace since the first one that has been, most of the work's been done on. And then there's a couple of adsorptive media as well. The draft MCL is expected in July of 2013, as we mentioned, and the cost of treatment will be relatively high compared to most other contaminants, but how high depends on how low the MCL winds up being. One important thing to note that I didn't mention was that the public health goal is currently 0.02 parts per billion, and we found that none of the technologies could reliably remove chromium to that level consistently, that you could operate a water system to those levels. And then finally, a couple of bullets that the chromium contamination in Glendale is mostly from industrial discharge. And currently under Superfund, the EPA is looking at the potentially responsible parties that have caused this contamination. And then the next step will be cost recovery. Thank you very much.
So are we, talk about cost recovery, so are we having to sort of front the effort, or we're getting the EPA
research effort has been paid for almost 100% by other parties. I think we've put up some initial costs that are under $100,000 of that $9 million. Dr. Blut's referring to, once the research is over, the MCL is set, where do we go from there? That's where we're, even on an ongoing basis, we want to get the responsible parties to pay for it, not the city of Glendale.
And you know what, just so people understand, watching at home or in the audience. So this is something that scientists, geologists call a plume. So there is a plume of water in the aquifer, and it literally starts up in the northern San Fernando Valley and follows the entire contour through Burbank, Sun Valley, Glendale, Los Angeles, all the way down to downtown Los Angeles, and who knows, I'm sure there's another Superfund site to the south of LA, I'm not exactly sure. And these are all of the pollutants that were thrown into the ground by the aerospace industry, petrochemicals, and everything else that occupied these spaces. So it's not just Glendale, this is a regional issue that people are having to, the governments and others, water districts are having to deal with.
And, sorry, will this report have any impact on the level of chromium-6 that is in the water? And what is that level that is being recommended by this report?
The report itself does not recommend an MCL. It just provides the information so that the state can do their own analysis.
Okay. And the information is that to match the MWB water, we would be around 5 parts per million. Is that what, to match the cost of providing in water, approximately?
What is, and again, between
and will that play into the level that the state will set, the safety level that the state will set?
I think the cost will play into that, the type of research that was done. But if you recall, it was this council that set more of a self-imposed figure of the 5 parts.
Right.
Because for lack of any other tangible, and Dr. Blute and Ramon can correct me if I'm wrong, we have consistently stayed at or below that level. So that's what we show the state. Now, if the state decides to use a different level or impose a different level, then we'll have to look at technology ramp-up above and beyond this to get down to that level. And likely, as Dr. Blute indicated, lower the level, higher the potential costs. Right now, if we...
Is it exponential, or is it...
I don't know if it's quite exponential, but it can go up quite a bit.
Go from 5 to 3 or 2?
It would direct you in a direction of it would send you in a direction of going with a different technology. So you would have to use the RCF, but then have better filtration, which was part of the testing that we did. So we proved that you could get down to 1 part per billion with that technology, for example.
Okay.
So I think, Mr. Manukian, we've shown that using that 5 parts per billion and these different technologies and, a larger scale project, as you saw, that 100 gallons per minute was a lot more expensive. We've been able to keep the treated water right about that MWD range.
We're also mixing it with MWD water to keep it in that range as well.
We're blending.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Senator Jarian.
Thank you. Nice to have you before us, Dr. Blute. We had looked at a different technology here at Council a few months ago involving magnetic and electrical forces and Lorentz forces on the chromium-6 ions. We actually had a small demonstration product, which we have been stymied in moving forward because of a lack of funding for testing the water before and after. And I did receive good news from Mr. Zern that there may be some funds available to do a test project on this procedure. And I have invited a physicist, Dr. Gagik Vartanyan, in the audience who very much wanted to speak with you and maybe catch up with you about your experience with that type of technology and the feasibility of that type of process working. It would not be replacing the weak base ion. It would be something that could be used as an adjunct to that to increase the efficiency of removing the chromium ion. So I don't know if you have much time today, but I'm sure Dr. Vartanyan would love to speak with you and Ramon as well, and bounce some ideas at a very high level off each other and see if such a process is possible.
Yeah, we will meet with the doctor right after this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I actually have one speaker card, Herbert Milano.
Who's the mayor pro tem? members of the City Council.
Is Councilmember Weaver.
Councilmember Weaver, members of the City Council and staff, my name is Herbert Milano. I want to address a couple of things concerning the use of chromium-6 in different types of industries. We basically have the problem that has been present for a very long period of time, decades, the solution that was presented to you today, and then we have the current cost and potential future costs of the impact of having to clean up the water such that it will be safe for consumption. I speak to you from the following background. For more than 2 decades, I have sold and installed material safety data sheet systems to allow companies to comply with EPA regulations. And the creation of the paragraphs needed to be able to identify the impacts of heavy metals is an important component of that. Now, on San Fernando Road, close to Duran, there is, I believe, still a paint plant that has been closed. And they were customers of mine. They were either Cortolds or PPG. And these plants in Glendale and in Burbank focused on selling paint products to the aerospace industry. Now, in addition to paint products, we have wood preservatives and we have anti-corrosion type materials that require the use and have used significantly the use of chromium, particularly chromium-6. So it is my suggestion that the city or maybe the Department of Water and Power create a database that we could all access concerning the history of companies in the last several decades that have been known to or are potential sources of chromium-6. The reason why I mention that is that I think that there is a lot of institutional knowledge from many residents in Glendale that might remember, oh yes, I remember in such and such location there was this type of company. In someplace else there was this type of company. Because even though the problem may exist nationwide, and even though the problem may exist coming down from other areas in the San Fernando Valley, I think that if we empower the residents to know more about it and to become involved, you might very well find sources of information that may allow the Department of Water and Power to better address the potential of these companies, if they were purchased by other larger entities, to become part of the Superfund type companies that merit investigation. So to rephrase it, I'm encouraging that the information be made available, put on the web, and identify all the companies that could have been potential sources of this material. Thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Councilmembers Friedman. Manukian.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. Next, please.
Next item is oral communications. This is a 3-minute portion reserved for community announcements. We will revisit the full 5-minute portion of oral communications at the conclusion of all city business.
I'll start with Doris Tweed, followed by Lorna Vartanian.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, Mr. Ochoa, and staff. I'm here this evening on behalf of the Mayor's Prayer Breakfast Committee. Every year I address you a time or two, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about our program this year. We're celebrating the 50th breakfast, and we hope everyone will come out to celebrate with us. Our speaker is going to be Pat Boone. He was the speaker in 1983 when over 1,000 people came out to hear him, and so we're hoping to match that this year. And we feel it's appropriate for him to speak because of his previous speaking, and it is a milestone of 50 years. Police Chief Ron DePompa will be our Master of Ceremonies, which is also appropriate because I believe he is a native of Glendale, and we're really celebrating Glendale this year. And our Glendale, David Schultz, a realtor in town, is going to be our soloist. If you've never heard him sing, you should come just for that. And to top it off, Glendale Community College, their chamber ensemble is going to provide music prior to the program. And this is a new ensemble. We've had the Rosemont String Ensemble in the past, but they're on break at that week, so we're going to go with the Glendale City College and hear something new. And there'll be a full breakfast served. The doors open at 6. The breakfast will be available at 6:30, and the program begins promptly at 7. Tickets are $25, and various levels of sponsorships are also available. There should be a number on the screen that you can call, maybe not.
It is at the bottom.
Well, there it is, 626-429-2198. So you can give me a call on that number if you have any questions. So we hope you'll be there.
Give us a date, one more time and location. Civic Auditorium?
March 21st, Civic Auditorium.
At 7 a.m.
Program at 7, breakfast at 6:30, doors open at 6.
Oh, excuse me, doors open at 6,
Yes.
breakfast at 6:30. All right. Thank you very much, Doris. Thank you. Lorna Vartanian, followed by Leon Mayer.
Mayor Quintero, members of the council and staff, my name is Lorna Vartanian. I'm here today on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Ross Moyne Mountain Homeowners Association to invite the community to a City Council candidate forum. We're holding this Thursday, March 7th at the Glendale YWCA 735 East Lexington. We'd like to invite everybody for a meet and greet with the candidates starting at 6:30. Forum starts at 7 p.m. sharp. Again, that's this Thursday, March 7th at the Glendale YWCA 735 East Lexington across from Whole Foods Market. Thank you to the candidates who are attending, and we hope the community comes out.
Thanks for hosting it. Who's the moderator, out of curiosity?
The moderator will be the vice chair of our action committee, Ruby Sulayan.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Sounds vaguely familiar.
And I won't be able to attend. I have a very important MTA selection committee meeting, but I wish you all the best, as well as everyone from the Homeowners Association.
I also won't be attending because I, number one, am not running. But number two, I'll be accompanying Mr. Najarian at the League of Cities for a very important issue. Otherwise, I would be there. Okay, thank you. Leon, followed by Sharon Wiseman.
Good evening, Mayor Quintero, members of the council and staff. My name is Leon Mayer. I'm here primarily for the library itself, as well as the Friends of the Library. And we're having a very interesting event on a week from Thursday. That's March 14th. And the event is One Book, One Glendale. Now, One Book, One Glendale started about 4 or 5 years ago, and a prominent writer is chosen every year for different reasons to get his book circulated through all the groups interested in reading. All the support groups in Glendale get involved, and they have meetings about the book. The book is available right now to go down to the library and take it out. And this year we were fortunate to get Hector Tobar. Hector Tobar has written a book called The Barbarian Nurseries. And I'll tell you a little bit about the book, but first of all, I want to talk to you about him. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner. He won the Pulitzer Prize several years ago for the unfortunate riot we had in Los Angeles. He's written a book called the present book, The Barbarian Nurseries, and he's written other books that have been accepted in the literary world. That's Thursday, March 14th, 7 o'clock. I have flyers, I have bookmarks, and Central Library will be open at 7 p.m. for the event, but come early and park across the street to validate your parking. Now, I have bookends that I'll pass out to anyone who wants them as I leave. I've already passed them around a lot to everybody here. And I have events about the flyers about the events, plus the Friends of the Library. People who support the library, who support the Book Nook and the children's group, They need your support, they need your membership, and I have membership cards. As I leave, raise your hand if you're at all interested in joining the Friends of the Library. Students and seniors, $10 a year. Families, $40 a year. So raise your hand, but more important, come to the library a week from Thursday for Hector Tobar and the Barbarian Nurseries. Thank you very much.
Sharon Wiseman.
Mayor Quintero, council members, staff, and everybody listening. I'm Sharon Weissman from Far North Glendale, and I'm here to invite everyone to another candidate forum. This is sponsored by the Crescenta Valley Community Association, and it's for the Glendale Unified School District Board of Education candidates and Glendale City Clerk candidates. It's Thursday, March 28th, from 7 to 9 p.m. at the La Crescenta Library, 2809 Foothill Boulevard, La Crescenta. It's at the corner of Foothill and La Crescenta Avenue, and we hope everybody will come join us to hear about these important issues. And our moderator is going to be Cindy Cleghorn from the Solentahunga Neighborhood Council. We like to have people who don't have a horse in the race, so to speak, to help us elicit information about these issues and people who wish to represent us. So I hope everyone can come join us, and look forward to seeing you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, please.
Next item on the agenda is adoption of ordinances. At 7A is an ordinance amending Title 10 of the Glendale Municipal Code 1995, adding Section 10.40200 relating to parking meter exemption for military veterans possessing special license plates.
I would like, sorry, thought you were done.
And this was introduced on February 26, 2013 by Councilmember Manukian.
I'd like to move the item.
Okay, roll call.
Councilmembers Friedman,
Yes.
Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. Next.
Item 8, under action items 8A, is Director of Public Works regarding cancellation of the Beeline passenger fare increase scheduled for July 1st, 2013. 8A1 is a motion rescinding implementation of the fare increase.
Mr. Ochoa, Mr. Zern.
Yes, sir. In August of 2011, the council had enacted or adopted a series of increases for Beeline. The upcoming increase to go from, I believe, $1 to $1.25 is set to be implemented in July of 2013. At this point, based on fare box revenue and our projections going forward, we believe that the fare increase can either be deferred or even eliminated at this point in time. Mr. Zern, if there's any details beyond that, I'm sure you can fill in the blanks.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Ochoa, and I'll be brief, but Mr. Ochoa covered most of it. As a result of a number of things, as you may recall, we reduced some of our service lines, the non-producing lines, which saved us costs budgetarily. Our revenue projections for both Prop A, C, and Measure R are up this year above what our projections were, and they're projecting to be up a little bit next year. We also went through, Ms. Engel, our transit manager, and myself went through, as I had promised, and thinned out our budget. We have contracted out services that were formerly in-house, and we've removed several salaries from the transit fund, the two most prominent being the former Traffic and Transportation Administrator and Assistant Traffic and Transportation Administrator, who both retired, and we did not replace those individuals, nor were so their salaries were removed from the budget. So this combination, not to mention another driving factor is Metro, MTA was planning on a rate increase, and they've decided to defer those too. So we think that we're in a position, we're a little more stable. As you recall, we started with a 25-cent fare. We increased it to 75, and last July increased it to $1. Our revenue's stable. Some of the projections from our outside sources and our reduction in our operational costs, we think at this time that we feel comfortable in deferring this or canceling it for now. And what I will likely do, as I had indicated when it came before you to implement this program, was we will put it as a regular part of our budget review. And so it will be looked at then. We'll talk about it. If we think there's a need to have a rate increase, we will discuss it during that process. But each March, April, May is when we'll bring it back to you, so that we don't let it get away from us as it had, where for years it stayed at 25 cents until we got to the point where we fell behind a little bit. So with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Is the fares at $1 now? Did it go up
Yes,
to $1
sir.
already?
Yes, sir. Last July 1st, it went to $1.
Are we able to reduce the rates?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Manukian, if you're asking me for a recommendation, I'd say no at this point. I think this is a good point that we're at now. If you recall, we have a relatively new bus fleet. However, those buses need to be replaced. We had no reserves with which to replace those buses, so now we're able to build up reserves. There's a transit maintenance facility that has been on the books for years, literally years, that we've now accumulated enough money that we can match the grants. We've received numerous grants for that and proceed with constructing that facility. I think it's long overdue.
Is it necessary?
It's absolutely necessary for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the facility we're in now could very well go away. It's leased by the contractor. It's owned by a company. We're way it's way undersized for our facility. We're natural gas buses, so in some cases we're having to do things that are a little out of the norm in order to comply with law. The dispatch center, the building itself, is just inadequate. And they've done a great job in dispatching and managing and maintaining the vehicles out of there, but it is not ideal. And that's what 10 years ago we had identified when we bought the land we wanted to do with it next to the transportation center, is to build our bus facility there, which is also where our natural gas fueling station is, and the infrastructure for that's in place as well. We just haven't had the funds to do that. We've got a tremendous amount of grant funds. Mr. Najarian has been critical in getting those through the MTA, but we needed that match, and we just didn't have that available.
Are these restricted funds? Are they enterprise?
Yes.
So you can't use these funds anywhere else?
No, sir. These are actually special revenue funds.
Not the grant funds, but the revenues that is being generated.
No, that has to go back into the system. And as you may recall, one of the problems we had was because of some of the federal monies we received, we were required to keep a fare box return of 20%. We were about 6.5% at the time. We're up to about 18.5%, so we feel much more comfortable where we're at.
Mr. Najarian.
So that's a good point. I think it's important that we keep our eye on that 20% target because we don't want to miss out on any federal funding. And what the fare box recovery rate is just an indication of what your fares are in relation to the total cost of operating your system. And if the federal government sees that you're too low, you're subsidizing too much, they're not willing to kick in their funding. In the case that we do receive and do experience increased revenues, I would, as my opinion, I would be much more interested in expanding service rather than lowering the rates again. I think the public has come to, well, we cut line 3 in half essentially, but I know that there's a big push, everything that we talk about when we talk about development downtown, we talk about connectivity, and we always try and look for the transit connections to make sense so folks won't have to have a car downtown or have fewer cars. So if there comes a time where we have extra money, I don't know if that time extra will ever happen, but I think we should look for opportunities to expand our system, whether it's through grants, whether it's through our recovery on our fare box or any method that we can.
And just to add to that, Mr. Najarian, in this year's budget we'll include a line item to do another line-by-line analysis. If you recall, that's the document that was the genesis, the basis, for looking at the various performance of the routes, the fare box recovery, and that type of thing. We're going to do that again, just so we stay current on everything. We see where demand is, and we see where there's opportunities.
Thank you.
Ms. Friedman.
I was going to ask a very similar question to Mr. Najarian's point, whether the budget allows for growth of the system or whether it's only for maintaining the system. It sounds to me like it's maintaining the system, which to me is not adequate. I've been up in the north part of the city lately, and I haven't had complaints about the bus fares, although I'm sure for many people that is an issue. But what I have heard a lot of complaints about is lack of service in that area. There's no bus that goes down Foothill Boulevard. It's very difficult to get from the far north of Glendale into Glendale because there's no Beeline service. We've cut off entire sections of our city, and I don't think that's acceptable with our Beeline. So I'm okay with going along with this right now, but if you tell me that it means that we're not going to be able to expand into those areas, I think we really need to think about this.
And I guess, Ms. Friedman, my response would be for the time being, we would like to expand the service. We just want to make sure we don't get ahead of ourselves. One of the other concerns we have is we have seen a drop in ridership.
Right, well, I understand, and we had also talked about that happening because the Metro fares were so out of line with ours that we had Metro riders who were taking the Beeline instead of the Metro because we were a lot cheaper. But I appreciate that, and I'm going to go along with this. All I'm saying is that I would like to see reflected in our budgeting expansion of the system and running it later into the night because a lot of people, again, can't use it because we stopped running. What time do we stop running the system? 8:30, and there are a lot of people out there who work, until 10 o'clock, or maybe want to go out to a movie, and we've basically said, if you want to go out and drink and see a movie in Glendale, you better drive, because public transportation will not take you home, and that's not acceptable either. We should be encouraging people to have public transportation as an option, so I'd like to see that in the upcoming budget, that we can accomplish what we want to accomplish. We can keep the fares low, but find a way to, grow the system as time goes by.
All right, Mr. Weaver.
I can say is that we've gone over this and over it ever since the Beeline system started. It takes a certain amount of money to run the lines, and we've studied this infinitum. Unless we have more money to add lines and trying to do it at night, it's never been economically feasible to do that. In every study that we've had done, with ridership dropping and the revenue not in, just to maintain the fleet and the routes we have into the foreseeable future is all I think we're going to be able to do. Just my opinion. With that, I'd like to move 8A1.
I know I have a speaker card, Herbert Milano.
Mayor Quintero, members of the City Council, and staff, my name is Herbert Milano. When the fares were increased so significantly a couple of years ago, it was a dismay to me to find out that during the harshest time of the economic downturn, that we would have to impact individuals who need this essential service even more. I believe that that we can justify subsidizing public transportation, because for those individuals who take the bus, those are cars that are not going to be on the road. For those individuals who do have automobiles but rather not use them. So for those who feel against the idea of subsidizing a public transportation, everyone who drives a car would benefit significantly by fewer people driving on these roads, especially with the increased congestion that we have experienced in the last couple of years. I would love to see the city take on this issue of public transportation and accessibility to public transit on a regular, scheduled basis so that we understand what the trends are. It seems to be economically obvious that if you increase the fares significantly, that there will be a drop in ridership. But there may be other factors involved as well. For those individuals who live in the area of the foothills, there's, of course, public transportation from the county and the MTA that allows them to get to Glendale fairly quickly and efficiently with just a couple of transfers. But I believe that there is a significant unmet need because the expectation and the regularity with which people expect buses to become available is a significant indicator as to whether they will be using the service on a continual basis. The longer you maintain stability, the more people get used to the fact that there is that service available and you increase the ridership. But I think that we need an analysis, a multi-year analysis of what has transpired. Now, if Glendale's finances were stronger, and it's my contention that they are not because of the significant pension cost, we're now seeing the effect. I think that a just society will allow for public transportation to be subsidized because everyone benefits. And it is just because we allow individuals who have difficulty transporting themselves from point A to point B to partake of a public service that helps their budget. So we cannot look at things in isolation. I think that the impact of the pay, pensions, and perks have impacted the city so much that we really need to revisit the idea that public transportation is a significant benefit that residents of Glendale should have. Thank you.
I'm just curious, Mr. Milano lives in Tujunga, whether he takes the MTA buses down to Glendale. That's just curious.
I just wanted to add, you can't run buses without ridership in them. We have lines out there, we analyze them all the time. When the ridership is low, you're not making enough revenue to maintain those buses. So we search for the areas where the greatest riderships occur. And if they don't show up in North Glendale, there's not going to be lines up there all over the place. I mean, that's reality. We've sat here and studied this. I have for the 16 years I've been sitting here. I'm hearing, oh, subsidize, do this, do that. We'll be lucky if we can just maintain the budget this year with no increases in anything. Seeing an uptick in revenue.
Well, and I do think the B line does a very good job. I mean, it is a municipal bus line. It's not a regional bus line, but yet I think we do a very good job of moving people throughout the city. Would I like to see more, or a bus on Foothill Boulevard heading south?
We can do that
absolutely
at a cost.
But, right, and when we did have some of those lines going, unfortunately, they weren't used very much. That's just a reality. It's more in the inner city, if you want to call it that, where we have these high riderships. But overall, I think the B line does a very good job. And, of course, they're all CNG buses, so they're very efficient. And Mr. Zern, you were going to say something?
Just that the discussion about pensions and salaries is kind of misplaced with respect to our transit system because it's a contracted out transit system. We have a third-party contract with something that's been outsourced for a number of years. Yeah, it's never been. So.
Right. Yet, on the other hand, they are unionized. Is that correct? They continue to be
the drivers.
Right. It's a Teamsters union, but
right.
For the most part, I think it's an efficient operation, and they've done a good job.
Now may I move 8A1?
Yep.
Second.
Roll call.
Council members: Friedman,
Yes.
Manukian,
Yes.
Jarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. Next, please.
Next item, 8B, is Director of Community Services and Parks regarding Glendale's 2014 Rose Float entry. B1 is a resolution appropriating $155,000 to fund construction of the float. B2 is a motion authorizing execution of a contract with Phoenix Decorating Company, Inc. in the amount of $150,000 for construction of the float. B3 is a motion providing direction to staff regarding fundraising, design selection committee, and ridership.
Mr. Durant.
Well, we have a very short presentation for you, predicated on the notion that the 2014 entry, if council chooses to go that direction, would be our 100th year as a city entry in the Tournament of Roses float, or in the Tournament of Roses parade. We are asking for direction with respect to the appropriation of funds with Phoenix Decorating, that you would also give us direction based on some of the information Mr. Duran will provide you as it pertains to our fundraising, our design selection, and our ridership.
Thank you, Scott. Mayor Quintero, members of the City Council, as Scott mentioned, we are here this evening to request that the City Council review and provide direction regarding community services and park staff recommendations for the 2014 Rose Float pertaining to the budget. And we're going to be recommending an enhanced budget authorization to execute a contract with Phoenix Decorating, one of two premier float design and build contractors, a fundraising strategy, a design selection committee, and direction regarding ridership. In terms of the budget, our Our 12-13 budget for the 2013 float was $111,000. That included $100,000 for the float construction contract, $5,000 for the entry fee that's due to the Tournament of Roses, and then $6,000 of staff time and other costs. We are recommending for the 2014 float a construction cost or budget of $150,000 in order for us to get an enhanced design and recognition of this being the 100th year and a historic monument. $5,000 for the entry fee and $10,000 for, again, staff time, which would include $5,300, and other costs, which would include $4,700. There are various design elements that impact the cost, such as animation. The degree which you have animation on your float will affect the cost of float. Pyrotechnics, whether you have pyrotechnics as part of your float design, of course, the size of the float, the height, the complexity and quality of floral arrangements will affect the cost, and sculpturing details will affect the cost. We do have representatives from Phoenix Decorating Company here to provide a much more thorough and intellectual explanation of exactly what goes into the different cost categories for floats. But staff is recommending an enhanced design for our 100th year, resulting in an increased float construction budget of $150,000, which would be $50,000 more than the last year's float. In terms of fundraising strategy, historically, the Glendale Rose Float Association would raise $50,000 and make a donation to the city of Glendale to offset the historically $100,000 cost of the float. In fiscal year 11-12, you might remember that we undertook a combination of a community fundraiser and also corporate donations. Then last year, our fundraising strategy was to reach out directly to corporate sponsors, and as we did today, we recognized the 3 corporate sponsors for the 2013 float. Staff is recommending for fiscal year 13-14 a two-tiered approach, which would be a combination of corporate sponsors, as we did this year, and outreach to the community for community donations, and any community member donating $25 or more would be eligible to be entered into a drawing to win 2 tickets to ride on the 2014 float. So that's the staff recommendation. And again, 2 years ago, when we did have the combined community corporate sponsor fundraising strategy, we received in excess of our target. We collected $97,000, and so we actually had an $8,000 surplus using that strategy. In terms of the design selection committee, historically the Glendale Rose Float Association would select a design, and then the design would be submitted to the city council for approval, and the council would approve the design. Last year, the city formed a Rose Float Design Committee that was comprised of the corporate sponsors and city staff, and the committee was responsible for working directly with Phoenix Decorating and their artists for selecting a design which best represented both the city as a community and the corporate sponsors in terms of branding of the different corporations, and keeping in mind the theme for the Rose Parade and the Tournament of Roses. Staff is recommending for the 2014 float to have the same design selection committee format as the current year, meaning with the corporate sponsors making up the design committee, and again, in exchange for their contributions towards the cost of the float. In terms of the ridership, we typically have 10 to 12 riderships available on our float, based on our float designs. Historically, the Glendale Rose Float Association sold riderships as part of their fundraising. Last year, under the design committee format, the committee also determined the distribution of riderships. So, for example, Glendale Adventist Medical Center had 5 riders, Americana Brand had 2. The city was allocated 4 riderships, which we then offered to the Glendale Unified School District to high school seniors. Staff is recommending for the 2014 float, depending on the number of spots, again, to have 2 riderships available to the community based on their donations and the raffle, and that the corporate sponsors, depending on number of sponsors, if it's 3 sponsors or 4 sponsors, would divide the balance of the riderships available on the float. We do have a standard timeline in order to sign a contract with Phoenix Decorating to begin the design process, pay the float entry fee, to determine the roses, to secure a spot in the parade, and begin outreach to corporate sponsors and the community for fundraising for the float. Staff is seeking council direction at this time in order for us to be able to meet that time frame. This does conclude my brief presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions council might have. And again, we do have representatives from Phoenix Decorating who is most knowledgeable about any and every aspect of the Rose Parade planning, design, building floats, and the intricacies and requirements of the tournament of roses, also available to answer any questions you might have.
Questions or comments from anyone? Mr. Najarian, then Ms. Fried.
The extra funding, about $40,000 to $50,000. Are we just going to? Is the idea to give them a larger budget and have them come up with something fancier, whether it's pyrotechnics or animation or different flowers and things like that?
That's the basic idea.
Okay. And because it's our 100th year anniversary of participating in the...
It would be great to win another award, and it would be very fitting to be able to win another award on our 100th year. Yeah.
And so I'm all for that, as long as we can get the funding piece together. Do we have any indication that we will still have the support of some of our larger sponsors that we had earlier, well, that we had last year and the year before?
A lot of the feedback that we've gotten was that they had a great time with it, especially for their employees and as something to rally around as companies. So I do believe that we'll be able to get the same level of support from any number of folks. I think the variable here would be doing the smaller donations from individuals and their families and what have you to give everybody the opportunity not to put in $5,000. Maybe you can put in $25.
Has our crew chief dealt with pyrotechnics in his experience in the Rose Float?
Nope.
Is he looking forward to it?
No, I'd like to try water or pyrotechnics, but the animation is what starts to drive the cost.
Hydraulics.
Are we taking suggestions for who would ride on the float at this point, or should we wait for a long time before we do that?
Wait.
I'm going for retired mayors. I think they should have prominent seats on the...
There's a few still alive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jess.
Ms. Friedman.
I was just going to ask, what happens and when do we have to make a decision if the fundraising doesn't come in? Is the city going to be in a position of having to pick up possibly a $100,000 bill for this?
In a
And
worst
what will
case
we do?
scenario, well, in a worst case scenario, yes, that would be the case. You could be looking at $150,000.
So is this the point of no return tonight?
Well, we'd be signing a contract, so ostensibly, yes. I think if we look at past history for what we did last year, that I do have confidence that we would be able to hit on a percentage basis the same level of support that we did in the current year.
And if it came down to us having to write a check for $100,000 or $150,000, you know where you're going to find that money in the budget? That's not going to...
I am hopeful that that through salary savings and other savings in different parts of the city, we could cobble together enough money and hold that in reserve in abeyance, but not let Community Services and Parks or my office off the hook in terms of trying to raise those dollars.
And we won't tell the potential sponsors that we might have the money.
Other than
We're going to redact
what we see here
said.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Comments?
Yeah. I'll make some. There's just my own opinions, having worked on the float for 20 years. Different things that I'd like to address. The last few years, there's been an awful lot of effort saying it has to represent Glendale. That never was the way in the past. I pulled up the names of the floats since 1911. just to let you know some of the floats we had. Peacock, butterflies. We had an elephant in 1926. Columbia, the gem of the ocean, the dragon, the Black Forest. That one was in 32, was the honor of the free youth movement in Germany and heralded the 1936 Olympics that would be held there. Hansel and Gretel, the Pilgrims, Cupid's Garden, Alice in Wonderland, Madame Butterfly, Peter Pan, Hawaiian Paradise, Venice, Sleeping Beauty, Spring Fair in Seville, Punch and Judy, Three Coins in a Fountain, Sunset on the Nile, Jewel of the Nile, and into my time, A Whale's Tale, Mother Goose, Party Animal, Swan, One Man Band. None of those represented Glendale per se. My own personal view is you want the most beautiful float that can represent the city, not have to be something in the city. We're running out of things in the city. We've done the Alex, we've done the airport. We haven't done Forest Line yet, but I don't know how we would concoct that one.
Yes, it's a good idea.
So I think getting the most beautiful float, and the way I would do it, because I've been through many iterations of how you select a rendering. Phoenix Decorating does dozens of conceptual designs, and the Roseville Association in the past, up until the last couple of years, always went through those renderings, and the committee narrowed down to 5, and eventually that came to Parks and Rec with a recommendation which won, and then on to the council for concurrence. I still think that should be done. I do not believe in the sponsors picking the float. We live in a community that is high in the arts. We have Disney and we have DreamWorks. We have all these artists. A committee of art-related people that can visualize and see the beauty in different renderings could easily be put together with make a recommendation working with Phoenix Decorating, because over the decades I've seen some beautiful, beautiful floats that come through there. One I know we rejected it for a number of years. It was a one-man band. But when it came to the time that we picked it, it was because it was going to touch the ceiling of Phoenix Decorating's building. It was 25, 30 feet tall. It was imposing, and it won an award. So depending on how you visualize it and you can see it, I presume we will still operate on a 35-foot frame. If you go 36, you're competing with the big boys. 35 feet, okay, you can go up. You're throwing in the animation. So when you start to get up this level, you're probably talking about some extensive animation on the float. Pyrotechnics, well, I've never worked with that. As far as sponsorships, there's a number of opportunities you can give sponsors. When I did my Dreamy Roses, we let the top ones get a seat on the float, of course. We have an opportunity as a city to get tickets to the Rose Parade and to the Rose Bowl game, and we used to purchase those at cost to the city, and they would be given to the top sponsors. You can also give a plaque thanking them. You go to different restaurants and you'll see Dreamy Roses plaque in there that they put on their walls. Tournament of Roses program. The redevelopment agency always put a full-size ad in Tournament of Roses program that goes worldwide, listing all the corporate sponsors that were in there. So there's ways to give them something without, giving away the whole float to sponsors. There's other ways to recognize that if those sponsors care about the city. What else would I like to say? Sponsorships. That, I guess those are the main things, unless I'm going to sleep with the switch. We have to sign the contract shortly to do it. When the renderings are picked within a short period of time, Phoenix Decorating then must go to the Tournament of Roses and make sure that they can still do that float. For instance, if we were to come up with an elephant, and there are 3 other elephants in the parade, ours would be rejected. So it's kind of important, whatever design comes up, that it can be reserved in the city's name. That's what's the paramount thing going now. And I've always, the number of riders on there varies with the design of the float. And I've always argued, well, this last year, for instance, I had 41 different high schools and junior highs that helped decorate the float. And I always thought, well, why can't a student from each high school get a seat on the float? Let every high school in the city, public and private, because they all work on it, have a contest. Select that rider starting in September. Let us know by December. It could be based on volunteerism. It could be based on scholastics. It could be based on a number of things, one of which would have to be having worked on the float. So every year you generate enthusiasm in the schools, and through the schools you'd be capturing the parents that would buy into this. As clear back when I started in 93, we'd say, well, how are we going to raise money? Well, we'd do a bake sale and other little trinkets that bring in $1,000 or $2,000. Now, there's been criticism of what I came up with Dreaming of Roses, but in the last year, I raised $135,000 with 50 or 60 sponsors. So there are ways to do it. You've got to find something that triggers it in the community. I think there's been more enthusiasm in the community for the float in the past 2 or 3 years, namely when we got down to the dog, the name of the party animal, that didn't exactly fly. That generated stuff all over the United States. And past year or 2, we picked the elephant, and that generated enthusiasm throughout the United States. You know, the old adage, you always say, no news is, even if it's bad news, it generates interest, is great. And I think we've seen that. And I think there'll be more people that will buy into it this year because of the exposure of the last few years. I've just stated what my opinions are on it, the amounts. If Mr. Ochoa says, staff say 155, well, I'll sure go out and try to get people to call Mr. Ochoa and offer up to him to be a sponsor on the float. And when I decorate it this year, if Mr. Lofthouse permits me to be the crew chief again, we'll try to bring in a winner, and we'll try to get at least 50 high schools helping us this year, because they're coming from all over L.A., because we're on the internet now. So we've even had people come out of Washington, D.C. and the Midwest that read about us on the internet and want to come out and decorate. So it's growing. Patience, you got to grow something slowly.
Okay, well, for the first time in a long, long time, I'm comfortable with this approach. I think you put together a good program to help ease the burden, because that's what it is, of having to fund the float. And so I think through the sponsorships and other creative ways, I think we can get this done and put together a good float and make it fun. I may be challenging Mr. Weaver for the crew chief position. I don't know.
I'd like to watch you do that.
But,
put in your 15, 16-hour days, right, Mr. Lofthouse?
Well, probably not. It was just too cold in that warehouse.
Well, that
That's
was
all
warm.
I can say. Yeah, he said that
Got
was
to
warm.
see when it gets down in the 30s and it's pouring rain outside.
But no, I think this is a good approach, and I think the community is going to be more involved, as a matter of fact, not just as sponsors, not just financially, but I think we'll have more kind of input, and so I'm okay with it. Any other comments? Motion?
What can I make? How do you do these, one at a time or together? I'll move A, B, 1, 2, and 3.
In a second.
Second?
Roll call.
Council members: Friedman,
Yes.
Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes.
I'd like to thank my colleagues. Now we can get to work.
Thank you.
Good job, Mr. Weaver.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
depends on what they come
Or should
up
we address you as chief?
No. My job is to decorate the float, period. I'm the only unpaid crew chief that guy has. I do it.
Well, let's double that salary then, I think.
What? What'd you say? I'm not? Oh, there's another one? Okay. Oh, yeah, you're right. But I do it as a labor of love, and because it's for my community, and we'll do our very best to bring another winter back to the city.
And I want to thank the Parks and Rec staff, ONIC, and so forth, just to, you guys have done a good job of putting all of these pieces together and making it work. So. All right, next, Mr. Clerk.
Next is oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the council may question or respond to the speaker, but there'll be no debate or decision. City manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for investigation and report.
All right, we'll start with Ben Wong, followed by Joel Ryan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, City staff. My name is Ben Wong. I am Local Public Affairs Region Manager with Southern California Edison. Last month, you should have received a letter from Mark Olson, who previously served as the company's representative to Glendale, informing you that I now have that role going forward. And I came here to introduce myself so that you can put a face to the name and the information that you received in the letter. I am not unfamiliar with Glendale, notwithstanding the fact that I am new with the company in that role. Our paths have crossed with many of you. Prior to me coming to Southern California Edison 3 years ago, I worked for the League of California Cities and was the executive director of the LA County Division for the last 2.5 years of the 4 that I was with the League. Before that, I worked for John Chung when John, now our state controller, was the State Board of Equalization member. And prior to that, I was on the city council in West Covina when this city stole my city manager, Jim Starbird, to come here and be your city manager. But I don't hold a grudge. My job with the company is to be your contact with Southern California Edison. And notwithstanding the fact that you have your own Department of Water and Power and that we serve very few Glendale residents or businesses at Edison, we do serve a small number. And to the extent that as elected officials and city officials you may hear from some of those customers of ours that are your residents and your constituents, I'm here to be able to respond to those concerns when you get them. We value, as a company, Southern California Edison, now in its 126th year, value the relationship and partnership we have with our local governments. We know we can't do what we do without that great partnership that we have with our communities. Just last year, Southern California Edison and Glendale went into a new franchise, a renewal of a franchise agreement for, I think, 25 or 30 years. And so I'm here to respond to any questions you've got and to, on a going forward basis, be your contact. So thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Just a question. Nice to see you, Mr. Wong.
Good to see you.
You consider Southern California Edison to be a forward-thinking company?
We like to believe we are.
So do you guys have those smart meters that
yes,
are all the rage?
We actually started a year or so before I came to the company with our smart meter installation. We call it Smart Connect. And I believe this year we will finish the installation of our 4.9 million customer meters throughout our service territory.
Do you have any regrets that you've went in that direction?
No, I think there's been a small number of people that have expressed some concerns about them, and the CPUC now offers, the California Public Utilities Commission now offers an opt-out option for those customers that don't want to have a smart meter because of their own personal concerns. But it's been a good program, and it's one that we believe will empower our customers to make good choices about their energy utilization and to, take advantage of energy efficiency programs that we have and that they have available to them.
Right.
And did you say the number is approaching 4 point what million?
We have 4.9 million customer accounts in our service territory that covers about 50,000 square miles. And this year we should finish the installation of all of those throughout our service territory.
The entire 4.9 million?
Yes.
I didn't realize
it's been taking place over several years. I think in 2010, shortly after I came to the company, we installed our 1 millionth meter down in the South Bay area.
I didn't realize.
We're finishing up in the Central Valley.
It's amazing.
If I may, talking about smart meters, and I'm glad that you're here, actually. I was going to ask you to stay afterwards because I just got an email from an individual whose utility rate is usually $40 to $60, and apparently your smart meter just billed them about $2,500. So I want to kind of give that to you. Maybe you can look into it and deal
Actually,
with it.
Christine Powers with your city staff contacted me earlier today, and I spoke to the customer. We're going to get some information. I don't know all the details. I don't believe it's smart meter related.
Okay.
It's, I believe, related to the fact that she was being billed for another meter that was switched, and that she was underpaying, we believe. So we'll know more later.
Okay, very
Thank
good.
you.
And the effects of the smart meters and the radiation they generate will be coming down probably in the next 10 years after all is said and done. But do you have a cost per smart meter for your?
I do not know that off the top of my head, but I can certainly get that for you.
Okay, thank you. Could you please stay around just to make sure that the individual I'm talking about is the same person that you are following up with?
Yes, I certainly can. I'm going to leave a stack of business cards, but I will stay and, at your break or at the conclusion
I'll just
of
walk
the
up
meeting.
and give you, just check with you the information.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joel Ryan, followed by Tony Passarella.
Mayors and members of council, my name is Joelle Ryan, Glendale homeowner, resident, parent, voter, member of Coalition for Better Glendale. And I am here tonight to talk about the Glendale Gun Show. I wanted to start off by extending thanks to the Glendale Police Department for just a real constant presence at the gun show this weekend. And there were no apparent safety problems. I've been found personally great parking in the area both days, and I'm grateful for all of that. At the same time, I'm proud that my fellow members of Coalition for a Better Glendale raised public safety concerns in advance of the show due to unprecedented attention from media and outside groups. Personally, my objections to the Glendale Gun Show have never been about whether it's a bad neighbor or a great neighbor. My objections have been and remain about whether it's an appropriate representative for me, my friends, my neighbors, our children. Now, I attended the Glendale Gun Show on Sunday morning, and yes, I survived. Once you got past the Obama as Hitler posters outside, the people inside were perfectly pleasant. I enjoyed looking at the vintage pistols. I was happy to see that even though alcohol sales were contractually allowed, there was nothing stronger than coffee available at the concession stands. I bought my son a Matchbox car. I was surprised by some of the things I saw. I was not expecting the I Love Lucy memorabilia, the Shirley Temple paper doll book, and the chocolate-covered nuts. And I was not surprised by some of the things I saw. I'd heard about Nazi imagery at gun shows, and sure enough, just to my right, upon entry, for $250, I could have had myself a Nazi flag. Elsewhere, I could have picked up a few Mammy figurines, a Confederate flag emblazoned bumper sticker, and a pamphlet outlining how the works of groups like the Brady Campaign, quote, kills kids. Those were very few dealers, however, literally 4, and they were not representative of the show. What was representative of the show was the ammunition. This kind of ammo was sold out, and that kind of ammo was sold out. There was one dealer, the star of the show, that had a long row of tables and a sign that indicated where customers could line up, and line up they did. People could buy ammo by the 1,000 roundful, and they did. And things were relatively quiet when I was there. The line was out the door, but it wasn't that far out the door. And by far, the number one accessory at the gun show was I believe is called the ammo field box. From adults to at least one child, I saw the boxes being toted here and there into the parking lot. And here's the thing. Some of the ammo dealers at the Civic this past weekend are also brick and mortar businesses. The big dealer, LAX Firing Range, for instance, is located in Inglewood. And good for them, and good for the ammo buyers, because there's no need to wait for a gun show to come around. There is nothing being discussed at Glendale City Hall that will prevent ammo buyers from going to LAX Firing Range, maybe even finding a bargain at one of their parking lot sales. That store is open 7 days a week, most nights till 10. It couldn't be more convenient. Now, the ammo business clearly is not my area of expertise, and frankly, it's not my thing, except when the Glendale Gun Show is held, not on private property, but on Glendale public property. Then, like it or not, it's my thing. So this weekend, I was once again dragged into the bulk ammo business. So was the city and all its residents. Now, before Sandy Hook, I tolerated this. After Sandy Hook, I won't, and we shouldn't. So often in our history, emotionally charged issues, as it were, bring us to moments of clarity and opportunities for leadership. In the 19th centuries, women's suffrage was an emotionally charged issue. And amidst that climate, the Wyoming Territory was the first to give women the right to vote. Now, let's face it, gender inequality still existed after that. In the rest of the country, nothing changed for years. But Wyoming drew a line, set a standard, and set itself apart. So back to today. If Council, you approve the ordinance soon to be before you, and I urge you to do so, then yes, gun and ammo sales will continue on private property in Glendale and elsewhere, but they will continue without our stamp. We will be free, and others will be free to follow us, because in our national discussion on gun violence and ammunition, we will have set ourselves apart. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Passarella.
Well, the mayor's not there. Oh, there he is. Good evening, Mayor, council members, staff, and viewing public. My name is Tony Passarella, 27-year resident of the city of Glendale. And I, too, was at the Glendale Gun Show on Saturday. I was there an hour before it started, and I stayed till about 2 hours before it closed. I documented the whole thing outside. They wouldn't let us shoot video inside. And I have to commend Sergeant Lorenz and the police officers that were there. They did an exemplary job in just standing in the wings, allowing the peaceful protesters on both sides of the issue to exercise their First Amendment rights, setting up literature tables as you walk in, having a rally right there on the grass, and there was virtually no problems whatsoever, inside or outside, as long as I was there. I want to read to you what I've titled Gun Violence in America. The senseless and tragic mass shootings in Aurora, Colorado, in Newtown, Connecticut, leave us all appalled and disgusted by the carnage. Some people listening to me right now want to place the blame on 30-round magazines or on semi-automatic rifles. We want to blame something, anything that we can control. What we really want to ban is violence, murder, and insanity. But no, we don't talk about that. The fact of the matter is that violence, murder, and insanity are built into the human condition and always will be. We're a depraved society. Let me give you some statistics to put it all into perspective for us all. In 2011, there were 8,583 firearm murders in the U.S. 323 of the murders were from rifles. I'm talking about all rifles combined, AR-15s, AK-47s, you name it. Hammers and clubs killed half as many as rifles. Hands and feet killed twice as many as rifles combined, and knives killed 5 times as many people. Preventable medical errors kill 98,000 people a year. And the whole of the U.S. medical system kills about 225,000 people per year, but nobody talks about limits or bans on hammers, knives, doctors, hospitals, because the good we perceive from hammers, knives, doctors, and hospitals far outweigh the perceived harm. Firearms prevent anywhere from 800,000 to 2 million violent crimes every year, but nobody talks about that. That's about 100 times more violent crimes prevented than take place every year. 12 million unarmed men, women, and children were unable to resist being murdered by their own nationalist socialist government in Germany. 20 million men, women, and children were murdered by their own Union Soviet Socialist Republic. 50 million Chinese were murdered by their own government under Mao, who also disarmed his people, in Cuba, in Vietnam, and in the killing fields of Cambodia. Mr. Manoukian and council members that agreed to ban the gun show, those listening at home, those that were here a month or whatever it was ago, isn't it true that we feel a need to do something because of these tragedies, recent tragedies? Isn't that true, that we feel a need? It grieved all of our hearts. So the thing that we can control, Mr. Manoukian, the thing that you can control is to ban the gun show. Then, if there is, which there's nothing that proves out that any guns from the show ever killed anybody, then it takes you off the hook. If, in fact, something does happen, it takes you off the hook, makes you feel better. You said you have control of that. But if Steve Raisin, if he wants to open up a gun show at the Hilton or wherever, see, then you're off the hook. If something happens with a gun from there, you're off the hook. You don't feel bad about it. So I want to invite everybody viewing by home, let's show up in droves next week. Whatever the side of the issue you're on, we have one last opportunity to speak our mind. Thank you.
Herbert Milano, followed by Mike Mohill.
Mayor Quintero, members of the City Council and staff, my name is Herbert Milano. I believe it was a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3, when we had a presentation by the city manager and finance, where we experienced a significant number of slides. The majority of those slides were not visible to the general public because the size of the print was just too small to be seen on television. And as it is so very common, as far as I have experienced, that staff brings to you a significantly large amount of data with a significant amount of narrative. And it appeared to some of the people who were present here today to say, my God, I'm so glad that you guys are doing it because it's just so complex. And I think that's part of the problem that I've seen throughout the commissions. They overwhelm the commissioners, they bring in significantly thick books of data, and do not synthesize it. And so I decided to just take some data, synthesize it, and make it easier for the public to understand. Now, before I start, I want to say the following. I did not clarify in my presentation earlier concerning public transportation and the buses, and my concern was the overall citywide costs of pay, pensions, and perks rather than the bus companies. All right, so let's start with this. I have in front of you a PowerPoint slide, there are only 3 of them, or 4, on Glendale's financial trends. It is my suggestion that Glendale present the trends whenever a staff report comes before you. So we've had roughly 72,000 households. Population decreased, but just to use it and to simplify this process, I use the actual numbers of households as I was able to find through the census and other means. And so here's what we have. In the year 2001, our pension obligation, as it appears on the CAFR, was $600 million. As of 2011, on the last CAFR, our pension obligation increased by $1.4 billion. Now, we can say that there are assets that basically help cover this thing, but you have to imagine that this is a risk that we have to support. So in case the economy does not support a proper return on that $1.4 billion, it's a much higher risk than if it were only $600 million. The city's long-term debt in 2001 was $169 million. It increased to $519 million. And I'll provide Mr. Ochoa the page and the paragraph where I got this information from. In addition to that, we have the unfunded liabilities, the actual amount that impacts your budget by the actual cash out that you need to prepare for. And so we have the the unfunded pension and the post-employment benefits. Not getting very complex, just those two alone, $418 million. So let's compare this. We had inflation that went up by about 27%. But here is how it becomes easily accessible to the public if you do it by household. A household owed, as part of their share of Glendale's debt, $2,300 back in 2001. It increased to $6,750. The public pension liability went from $9,000 per household to roughly $20,000 per household. These are numbers that become meaningful when it is presented in this cost accounting type of presentation. The post-employment health benefits went from 0 to $2,644, and then you have a total here of liabilities per household. If you live in an apartment or a house, your share of the debt or the obligations of the city of Glendale went from $12,000 to $29,000. This, in just 2 slides, you have a presentation of what has transpired. And then we can basically do a drill down and say, how does it impact the needs of the city to be able to meet those obligations? And you meet it through transfers from the Glendale Water and Power. So I'll be putting this information and other information that drills down those numbers and other costs of the city on this website. The website is under my name, herbertmolano.com, and I will have a summary of all of the presentations that I made through hundreds of meetings that I've attended, including the budget meetings going back the last 12 years. Because I think that presenting information that is relevant, easier to understand, should be the objective of staff and the objectives of the City Council to give the public. It is this way that we begin to understand the trends and the overall impacts, and allows us to have a wiser discussion of how to solve these problems. Thank you very much.
Mike Mohill, followed by Harry Zavos.
Council members, my name is Mike Mohill. Over the past 14 years, the quality of life in our Jewel City, Glendale, has not improved. Council has decided to change the landscape of our downtown with many mega complexes of apartments and condos. Controlled growth is nowhere to be found. In the few short years, this council has helped change the face of Glendale by approving every apartment and condo development before them, including the corrupt public housing company, ADI. A partial list of apartments and condos approved by this council with minimum parking without a traffic circulation infrastructure plan includes Broadway lofts, 208 lofts, including 14 low-income housing units on Broadway at Maryland. Inadequate parking provided for tenants and guests. Developer was given a $3 million parking concession over the life of the contract of taxpayers' money for tenant usage of the Maryland Street public parking garage. 600-seat Lemley Theaters with 42 lofts on Wilson at Maryland. The city contributed $1.1 million toward only one level of parking. Developer was given a variance for 125 parking spaces. Developers saved millions of dollars by not requiring additional subterranean parking, and council again used the usage of the Maryland Street public parking garage. Now on Central, the following properties. Verdugo Gardens, 220 mega apartments on Central at 134th Freeway. Legendary Towers, 80 condos close to Central on Lexington at Orange. Right across the street from Legendary Towers, close to Central again, Lexington and Orange, 307 mega condo units. Right across from the 307 mega condo units on 201 North Central, an 84-unit apartment building. Holland Partners Properties located at Central at Wilson, 153 mega rental units. Salem Street near Central, the city allowed a demolishing of 2 single-family properties in order to build 44 low-income housing. The developer also allowed to use public parking lot number 12. Courtyard by Marriott Hotel, 173 rooms on Central and Wilson, inadequate parking for all the amenities of a hotel, additional parking provided by taxpayers at nearby public garages, developer saves millions of dollars. Across the street at Wilson and Brand, a 235 mega apartment complex in the heart of Glendale. Former Joanne Fabric Building on the southwest corner of Wilson and Orange, 1 block west of Central, 166 mega apartment complex. The Hampton Inn at the corner of Brand and Colorado, 5-story, 94 units with a variance of 6 fewer parking spaces. And now we have South Glendale at the corner of San Fernando and Los Feliz, right across from Memorial Hospital, the Triangle Project, and a 287 mega apartment complex with 22 low-income units. Right next to that, at 435 Los Feliz, the Tropical Mega Apartment Complex with 238 units and 12 low-income housing units, also with parking variances. In the last 4 to 6 years, this council has approved approximately 4,000 new units, which will bring in over 10,000 new residents in downtown and South Glendale. By increasing the density at an alarming rate, we will only accelerate and worsen an already congested situation. This council has absolutely no vision to allow developers to use the public parking spaces paid by the taxpayers for when and in the future, when the business climate improves on Brand and Central, folks who come to shop in Glendale will not be able to find convenient parking. This city needs new direction and new leadership to improve our quality of life that we all once enjoyed. Thank you. My name is Mike Mohill.
Harry Zavo, stick around, Mr. Mohill.
Council, my name is Harry Zavos, and last week I read from the charter where it excluded GWP monies from going to the general budget fund that pays for general appropriations, pays for parks, libraries, fire, and the like. I indicated in spite of this prohibition, the city annually transfers $21 million to that general budget fund, and that ballot measure B will legalize this practice. Finally, I said the charter does authorize GWP transfers, but to the general reserve fund, not the general budget fund. The only, and I emphasize only, GWP charter transfer language appears in Article 11, Section 22, that establishes the GWP surplus fund. That section answers 2 questions about the GWP surplus fund: what monies go there, the fund's inflow, and how those monies can be spent, the fund's outflow. Tonight, I'll address the second question, next time the first. The permissible GWP Surplus fund outflow is given in Article 11, Section 22. And I read from that section, except as otherwise provided in this section, disbursements from said water and power surplus fund may be made for waterworks or electrical works purposes only, and then follows the only exception, at the end of each fiscal year an amount equal to 25% of the operating revenues of the Department of Glendale Water and Power for such year shall be transferred from said Glendale Water and Power surplus fund to the General Reserve Fund. That's the only transfer language in the charter, and it's from the surplus monies of GWP to the General Reserve Fund. So, GWP surplus monies go to the General Reserve Fund, where they lose their identity. As I indicated last week, that's because they are commingled with excess general budget monies that also under the charter go there. Article 11, Section 22 tells us what that General Reserve Fund is for. Artie? I'm here. The council shall maintain the permanent revolving fund known as a General Reserve Fund for the purpose of keeping the payment of the running expenses of the city on a cash basis. The council shall have power to transfer from the General Reserve Fund to any fund or funds such sum or sums as may be required for the purpose of placing such fund or funds as nearly as possible on a cash basis. It shall be the duty of the council to provide that all money so transferred from the General Reserve Fund to be returned thereto. Section 15 goes on to indicate once the minimum balance required for the General Reserve Fund is met, advances need not be returned, but can be used for any city purpose, which would, of course, include enterprise funds. It's clear the charter does not dedicate General Reserve monies to pay for general appropriations. The General Reserve Fund is a revolving fund of credit to advance monies with those monies being returned. Measure B eliminates this fail-safe General Reserve Fund, as well as the GWP Surplus Fund. In their place, Measure B authorizes up to 25% of GWP revenues, regardless of surplus, to go to pay for general appropriations, to pay for general services, and instead of providing for water or power. These are not mere accounting changes. They are substantive and are another reason I will vote no on Measure B. We should not ratify cannibalizing the utility to pay for general appropriations. And for those who want a deeper analysis with backup on this issue, go to www.oggc.org/harry.pdf.
Okay, let me start with Mr. Mohill, who left. He's busy campaigning, so he might have.
Is Mike on?
Yeah, my mic's on. First of all, he talked about some housing units. There's 44 units, the ones on Salem, that are going to be built for veterans. He lately has been talking about being a Vietnam vet, so we're going to have veteran housing, those 44 units, including a supportive service for those vets that need additional services to help them get through life. So I'm very proud about that. But just in general, let me say that during the last budget sessions, I believe it was, or maybe it was 2 budget sessions ago, he was quite hysterical and angry and basically talked about the city going into bankruptcy, etc. And I mentioned at the end of the meeting that the sun would rise the next day. I made that comment, which angered Mr. Mohill even more. The sun did rise, and today the Dow Jones Industrial Average hit an all-time high. I think the S&P is, I think, at a 5-year high. Is the economy back to where it should be? Absolutely not. We're still struggling, but we're certainly moving in the right direction. So I think Mr. Mohill is wrong about the housing that we're building. I was going to talk to him about what's called the new urbanism. We basically downzone, just so people understand, we downzone this city. You can't build the kind of units that you built years ago that transform the southern portion of the city of Glendale. An irony of ironies, as I always point out to Mr. Milano, he was one of the investors that helped to basically transform the city of Glendale, buying an apartment unit that was totally overcrowded and kind of ruined the rest of the street. That is done. We have downzoned, so that will not take place in this city. On the other hand, we're building buildings in the downtown. They are parked. They're near public transportation. The entire country is going in this direction. Mixed use, it's called, with commercial at ground level and housing above it. I think it's a great idea. I think it's going to bring new vitality to the downtown. I think people will shop and eat and work in the downtown. So I'm all for that. I'm very happy that we went in that direction. The numbers that he continues to throw around and other candidates are throwing around are absolutely not true. They just make them up, but this is America. You can say whatever you want, and we'll let the voters judge.
Just a little addendum on what the mayor said. I also want to point out that those buildings downtown, the residential buildings, as far as I know, every one of them is parked to code. None of them have parking reductions for the residential component. So I don't know why this inaccuracy keeps being brought up by these candidates. These buildings have some variances to allow things like tandem parking, which makes sense if you have two cars and one couple. But they absolutely are parked to the required number of parking by code. Thank you.
Mr. Weaver. I wanted to feed on what you said. I was going to say it. This councils I've served on for the last decade had visions and goals, which were to do a downtown-specific plan where the future development of this city would be downtown, or condos, apartments, whatever, walking distance to eat, walking distance to transportation, whatever. And when we did that in the downzoning, can you tell me, Mr. Agani, what has happened to condo development apartments in the residential neighborhoods? What's happened?
As it was council's intention, the pressure in the residential neighborhoods has actually been almost eliminated completely.
Almost eliminated. And where I was at the beginning, and I think some of my colleagues were, if we continue to have the building in the residential areas, taking down single-family homes and building 20-story units, we would have more cars in the residential neighborhoods on our residential streets, more congestion, more of everything. That has been stopped because the councils have had a vision to stop it. For Mr. Mohill, as you said, Mr. Mayor left already, he can't see that. Of course, he's living up in Glen Oaks Canyon with me. You can't see his house. It sits up on a hill surrounded by trees. So it just infuriates when he doesn't even understand what we have been doing and doing right by all measurements that you want to make. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a comment. I voted against the downtown specific plan, and although I've always been in favor of downtown residential housing, my objection was the bonuses in the density, and I still object to that. I just believe that the zoning that was implemented with the downtown specific plan increased the density to a degree where it's not sustainable as far as the traffic and transportation and quality of life in the downtown are concerned. And the bonuses that were given in certain areas were exceptionally, they were too much, in my opinion, and I believe that it's been requested by council members to revisit the issue of the bonuses in the downtown area, if I'm not mistaken. As far as the gun show is concerned, I appreciate the comments made by everyone here today. We will deal with this issue on the 12th, if I'm not mistaken, on the 12th. I personally would rather be proactive than reactive. My main contention is with the gun show is that it is across the street from a community college where a number of high school students attend as well. I just don't think it's the proper venue for it. So we'll see next week how this council will vote on that item and how the ordinance is crafted, and we'll go from there. So thank you very much for everything, for everyone coming out and speaking about that.
If council please, we could talk about, no, it's your call, on the Measure B and some of the opinion proffered as fact by one of the speakers, because it's been asked and answered. And long story short, general fund, general reserve fund are effectively one and the same. When you look very conveniently, the discussion is oftentimes the omission of the word that, regarding the transfer, that it's a transfer of operating revenues, gross revenues. That is often problematic, that we're looking to clean up. So yes, it is indeed an accounting cleanup.
Yes, the word I was looking for was generous. The bonuses that were sometimes we talked about words that come and sometimes you miss the words. The bonuses that were given for the downtown, with the downtown specific plan, were extremely generous in my opinion.
Ms. Friedman, actually, did you? No.
Well, I just want to say that if anyone wants a up-close and personal look at the downtown specific plan, the Downtown Dash that no one mentioned earlier today is taking place this Sunday at 7 a.m. The joint venture, it's a community-wide venture, but it's there's a slide. Glendale News Press and Glendale Adventist Medical Center are both sponsoring it. I think someone was here to make that announcement earlier, but they forgot to, for anyone who's still watching at home.
I will be there with my bike. I will be going up in the mountains, but I'll stop by there first and then head out.
Thank you.
I'll probably get there at 6. It starts at 7.
That's a shame. Mr. Choa, Mr. Milano, Mr. Zavos, Mr. Mohill all left before you could speak, so they never
busy
heard what you said.
campaigning.
Yeah, they're
Have a
campaigning.
motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned.